The Oracl Network. Look deeper.
We have an active shooter. We have an active shooter inside the warehouse.
Welcome to Active Shooter, a podcast that covers the whys, the hows, and the aftermath of active shooter and mass casualty events.
They have an active shooter in the building. A second call says they are being attacked.
I've been shot. 16910 means we got shots fired. 4:15 ASF. Route 291 sounded like an automatic firearm.
Active shooter, reports of an active shooter,
mass casualty incidents.
Thank you for listening.
You are listening to Active Shooter, a podcast that may contain adult themes, explicit language, and graphic depictions of violence. Portions of this show may be traumatic for those under 18. Listener discretion is advised.
Good morning. We have breaking news, so we're going to pause now for an ABC News special report. For those of you just joining in, we've been having coverage of the shooting at an elementary school in Newtown, Connecticut, the Sandy Hook Elementary School, in which 27 people were killed, 20 of them children.
Mass shooter events are undoubtedly one of the most horrific and traumatizing events any person can experience. The emotions range from shock, horror, sadness, relief, gratitude, and even guilt. Guilt of surviving what many around you did not. Those are heavy burdens to carry. Burdens no human should ever have to experience, let alone bear for a lifetime. Yet these tragedies happen far too often. And despite the outrage, anger, and grief we experience as a nation, they continue to happen again and again. Laws certainly haven't stopped mass shooters, nor have we as a collective society been able to come up with the right solution. Yet the problem persists, and the tragedies repeatedly ensue. Active Shooter is not a political podcast. We are not here to advocate for or against gun control. We are here to shine a light on this disturbing and growing phenomenon in the hope that by understanding and examining the perpetrators, we can work together to identify these people in our society and intervene before the next tragedy ensues. Maybe that means contacting law enforcement, contacting school officials, mental health professionals, parents, or even just being a friend and place of support. We advocate the See Something, Say Something movement. Here at Active Shooter, we will continue to examine the events that led up to the crime and to identify, if possible, why it happened, if it could have been prevented, and do it all while lessening the notoriety of the shooter. More importantly, the Active Shooter podcast wants to share the story of the innocents, those that were injured both physically and emotionally, and those who tragically lost their lives in these senseless acts of violence. We want to tell the stories of the heroes that selflessly placed their own lives on the line to save others. Much like many of the other shootings we have covered, today's case happened at a school and was committed by someone that showed the early warning signs of a person who would likely and eventually harm others. It is a double tragedy because it didn't have to happen. It could have been prevented. There were many failures that happened before this needless and senseless event occurred. It's no secret that crimes against children are always the hardest and most difficult cases to talk about. Today's victims are mostly young children with their entire lives ahead of them, going through life with hopes and promises of a future that should have been theirs to live. Those who survived also suffered losses, the most important of which was their innocence. Instead of being sheltered and protected from the violence that has become so prevalent in today's world, they learned far too young about bad people with malevolent thoughts and intentions. Instead of learning to read, they learned about cruelty. Instead of running on the playground, they ran for their lives. They were robbed of their childhoods. While this was one of the hardest cases for us to cover, it is also one of the most important, because within the wreckage and devastations were stories of heroic sacrifice and bravery. We need to share their stories and highlight their acts of bravery. We need to grieve together for the young lives lost and cut short before their prime, before they ever had a chance to dream about big futures. Each adult and child lost in this school shooting deserves the justice that comes from having their stories shared and their memories preserved. Today, we will talk about the massacre that took place at Sandy Hook Elementary School. Active Shooter the Podcast is a High Five Holly production, and I'm your host, JT. If you've listened to our prior episodes, you know that the Active Shooter Podcast team has taken the No Notoriety pledge, and we will not be sharing the real name of the shooters that we cover. We will be giving the shooters a pseudonym and refer to them by that name throughout the episode. This will help in clearing up any confusion in the story, while remaining true to our pledge and not naming the shooter by their actual name. In today's episode, we will refer to the shooter as Robbie. On December 14th, 2012, Robbie drove his mother's black Accord to the Sandy Hook Elementary School, located in a picturesque neighborhood in Newton, Connecticut. He parked his car in the fire lane in front of the school and calmly and resolutely walked towards the main entrance with his Bushmaster XM15 E2S in hand. He was also armed with a Sig Sauer handgun and a Glock handgun. He had a goal, and that goal was to take as many lives as possible. He had prepared and studied for this day. He had pages and pages of spreadsheets he had created to track other school shooters along with their final body counts. He intended to end this day by going down in history by taking as many innocent lives as he had bullets. He wanted notoriety and recognition, and in order to obtain his rightful place in history, he had to hit high numbers. He was determined and resolute in those plans. The young lives he planned to take wouldn't be his first murders of the day. Robbie was no stranger to violence. In fact, just hours, if not minutes before driving to Sandy Hook, he silently walked into his mother's bedroom. His mother, who was peacefully sleeping in bed, and pointed a .22 caliber Savage Mark II rifle at her head and pulled the trigger twice, instantly killing her. He dropped the gun on the floor next to the bed, took the keys to his mother's Honda Accord, and drove towards Sandy Hook Elementary School. He was ready to kill again. This time, however, he was going to prey on the most innocent and vulnerable among us, schoolchildren. Dressed in black from head to toe, he felt like a stealthy ninja as he walked towards the school. He had a mission. In addition to his all-black clothing, he was wearing dark sunglasses and earplugs. He needed to protect his eardrums from the loud shooting. He was all about safety. He also wore an olive green load-bearing vest, which isn't bulletproof, but a vest with multiple pockets to hold excess ammunition. He didn't know how much time he would have, but he wanted to be prepared for any scenario. So he was carrying around 31 pounds of excess ammunition on his person at the time of the attack, which was a little more than 30% of his body weight. Reaching the front door, he discovered that the door was locked. This is what happens every morning at 9:30 a.m. after all the students and teachers are safely inside. It was one of the school's many anti-shooter safety measures. The school also had a video camera system where the office staff could monitor and see who was at the door and who was allowed onto campus. In fact, this too was a part of their anti-shooter safety measures in place to keep staff and children safe in the unlikely event of a shooter.
We do our Pledge of Allegiance at 9:10, and then 5 minutes later, the doors are locked. All the doors and all going around the whole building. And then when people come, they have to buzz. There's a camera. They push a button, it buzzes in the office, and we buzz them in.
Robbie expected these safety measures and didn't waste any time. He wasn't going to wait for anyone to let him in or deny him entry. Instead, Robbie used the Bushmaster rifle to shoot the window panes around the door to gain entry. He shot at the windows around 6 times before the hole in the thick safety glass was large enough for him to step through to get into the school. Robbie was now in the building and had a choice to make. If he continued walking straight, he would have arrived at the principal's office. If he went right, he would have ended up at the school cafeteria where multiple students were practicing a school play. If he took a left, he would be in the hallway where various first-grade classrooms were located. Robbie chose to turn left, sealing the fate of 26 people, including 20 young children, before he started down the hallway of the classrooms.
When I first got there, it was like a regular day. We got to school, we did everything we needed to, and then we heard all this racket.
At 9:34 a.m., some of the teachers and other school faculty were having a meeting when they heard a loud noise. Not knowing what the commotion was, Principal Don Hochsprung, school psychologist Mary Sherlock, and lead teacher Natalie Hammond went to investigate what the sound was and where it was coming from. On some level, they knew they were headed towards danger, but protecting children took precedence over their own safety. Instead of running away from danger, they ran towards it.
Surveyed all 8 cars, be advised, Newtown has an active shooter. Active shooting at Sandy Hook Elementary School in Newtown.
Good morning. This message is from the superintendent of the Newtown Public Schools. Due to reports of a shooting, as yet unconfirmed, the district is taking preventative measures by putting all schools in lockdown until we ensure safety of all students and staff. Thank you.
As Dawn, Marie, and Natalie approached the loud bangs, they came face to face with Robbie, the enraged gunman. The ladies shouted, "Shooter! Shooter! Shooter!" as they had been trained to do in case of such an event. In doing so, they alerted other school personnel of the presence of a school shooter within the school, and by doing so, they saved many lives. Robbie raised his rifle and shot directly at the women. Dawn and Mary were killed almost instantly while he left Natalie gravely injured. Although she had been shot 4 times, she still managed to crawl into a classroom and shut the door behind her before calling 911.
Are you safe right now?
I think so. My classroom door is not locked.
Okay. Is there anybody that can lock the classroom door without being safe?
No.
Safe to do so. Okay. All right. Just try to stay where you are. Okay. Is there any way you can...
Yes. There's children in this room. So.
Okay. Try to apply pressure. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. We have people coming. Okay. All right. Is there any other teacher with you in there, or is just students?
No, there's 2 other adults in the room with me.
Okay. All right. Are they right next to you? Where are they in the room?
No, they're over on the other side of the bookshelf.
Okay. All right. Are you okay right now?
For now, hopefully.
Undeterred, Robbie continued to walk down the hallway. As he headed towards the main office, a custodian named Rick Thorne, who was on the other side of the school and had heard the gunfire, immediately took action. Rick